What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Seth Price of BluShark Digital. And Seth, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And let's see, some of the fan favorites, the co-founder of Pixar on. He actually talked about how they started. He talked about some Steve Jobs stories, some George Lucas stories, really amazing interview. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, I had Kevin Hurrigan, who has had an agency since 1995. If you can imagine what the landscape looked like back then. So check out that and many, many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do strategy, the accountability and full execution of a podcast. And, for me, Seth, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and profile what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, Seth has multiple podcasts. You should. And you can check out more at rise25.com. And Seth Price is founding partner of Price Benowitz Accident Injury Lawyers, as well as, if he wasn't busy enough, the founder and CEO of BluShark Digital. Seth actually took a two-person law firm, scaled it to over 36 lawyers in less than a decade. Now Seth has taken the same digital power they built the firm with to create an amazing, best-in-class digital agency focused on the legal space. And he's a frequent lecturer, moderator at some of the largest, most influential law conferences in the United States and speaks all over. And you can check them out at BluSharkDigital.com. That's without the E, BLU, Shark Digital. Seth, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
So I want to go back to your college days. You're at Penn. Did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I grew up in New York. My dad's a lawyer. I came out of undergrad in 91. The economy wasn't great. The go-go 80s had died down. And so law school seemed like a safe place to sort of spend a couple of years. I went in not wanting to practice law long term. I loved the business side, and that was reinforced when I basically took a job out of law school at a big firm. But when doing transactional work, I always wanted to be the client. They were doing these cool things. They were doing like roll-ups of Microsoft reseller agreements, and these guys were spreading all over the country and doing stock option plans. Like, that's for me, and I don't want to do this boring paperwork. So I jumped the moment that the economy started to blow up and the dot-com bubble started to build the end of the latter half of the 90s, went to New York to make my fortune, consulted with a ton of clients there on digital, dove in really early, and was a founding employee at something called uslaw.com, which was a precursor to FindLaw, LegalZoom, and had an amazing ride there.
What did you do there?
It was essentially LegalZoom or FindLaw, but before its time, similar to what Friendster might have been. If you remember that, the idea that, like, if you had the technology, another friend of mine had the Square. These were people that had Facebook before Facebook, but whether the broadband wasn't there yet, lawyers had to be convinced to advertise on there. They're like, why would I want to be on the website? Why would I want to be in a directory? It was literally pulling teeth to get. They would spend more in acquiring the customer and the lifetime value of the customer. And it was, the bubble burst in April of 2000. By January 2001, much was gone. Amazon was down to, like, I forget what it is, $4, $5, $6 a share from its high. Google remained, but like all these different search engines disappeared. The 17 different pet food delivery services disappeared, and we were left with more fundamentals. And that the ones that did survive, for example, FindLaw had been bought by Thomson Reuters. They had the money to survive those ups and downs. I licked my wounds, and a few years later, ended up, my buddy Dave Benowitz wanted to start a law firm. He's a lawyer's lawyer. He loves the courtroom. He wants to be there every day. I want to be outside the courtroom. So we did chocolate and peanut butter. We started with the two of us in his basement. I building a website, optimizing that website piece by piece. We ended up with, dozens of lawyers, dozens of websites. And about 7, 8 years ago, on the way from infancy to a 43, 44 lawyer law firm, I pulled our digital team out of Price Benowitz and into BluShark Digital, which now represents more than 200 law firms nationwide for their digital marketing. Everything from building websites to their paid strategy, both PPC and LSA is a very, very big thing in the legal space where you can get calls from Google instead of just clicks, as well as the burgeoning paid social world, which works much better on national plays such as mass torts, less well for what I'll call single event people who are trying to get people within a local market.
Did you recognize, Seth, at that time, I had Mark Winters on, who co-authored Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman, and they talk about the visionary and the integrator. I don't know if you recognize at that time, with you and your partner, you seem like you are the business side and he loves the craft of it. What did you recognize at that point? Or was it more like an opportunity that just you happened into, or did you recognize, hey, we actually have this, that we have a perfect combination?
There was nothing recognized. In my time, I took some of my modest winnings from the dot-com bubble and invested in real estate, which was hitting a pretty hard place, 06, 07, 08, 09. And we were just looking for a way to make a buck. He really wanted to practice. That was his passion. And I'm like, I really did. We actually walked the franchise floor of one of these huge trade shows. It was like the year of all the marble slab and different ice creams. And I'm like, none of this makes any sense to me. And it turned out to be prophetic because all that stuff blew up. But there wasn't, Rocket Fuel wasn't written yet at this point. It was, basically, how do we start a business? We have two skill sets. And, you hear about this now where people are developing things during a downturn. Like we may have a downturn coming. Let's hope we don't. But if we do, we were able to hire like crazy. When nobody else is hiring, there were huge opportunities. Every job we posted got hundreds of applicants, and we got some amazing talent that gave us some great, a great running start that allowed us to get there. So, I see in, our mutual friends, people like Michael Gerber, and as an early EO member when it was actually YEO back in the day, I heard a really inspirational talk. And while I don't think his stuff works as well with law firms per se, the business acumen is freaking genius. And the idea was, can I get myself out of day to day, which was how we designed it. I think one of the things that our clients struggle with is that it's hard to get yourself out of day to day. And anything that you delegate is not going to be done as well as you doing it yourself. If every podcast client only dealt with you, you'd be great. But if you want to have, scores of clients, you're going to end up having people that you have to trust. And as that happens, it is tougher and tougher. So I feel blessed that we were able to divide and conquer, because if you're sitting there with a full caseload, it's very hard to actually get, out of the trenches and into that. Now we have terms for it, but visionary, this idea, nobody had scaled a B2C firm in our market. There have been some TV advertisers in PI, but really nobody outside of PI had done anything at scale. And so I just feel, very blessed that I was given that opportunity to not have a caseload and actually build out the firm.
I love the evolution of the growth. And one thing that helps with growth you mentioned is finding talent, right? You have amazing people that work for you so that you can do what you do and be in your zone of genius. Talk about the hiring process a little bit.
It is one that it is a love-hate related. It's a must, and you got to be great at it. And I see so many of our mutual friends who have written great things on Cameron Harold and Derek Colburn and all these guys that are have their own methodologies. It started out for me as, okay, we're getting through the day. We were in growth mode during these late aughts, early, I don't even know what you call it, as we went after 2010 into 11, 12, 13, we're in hyper growth mode. I would essentially first I did it myself. I'd place ads based on Craigslist, which worked back in the day. Now we've moved on to LinkedIn and Indeed. I wish there was waiting to see what's next, but those were great days because they were free, and then maybe $25, $30 an ad, but it was nothing. And I would place ads and then call people back, between 8 and 10 o'clock, maybe 9:30, 9:45 being the latest, and finding out if somebody was bothered with me calling them at 9 o'clock, probably wasn't the right cultural fit for what we were doing at that time. Ironically, in today's digital world, if I did that as my screening mechanism for BluShark, I with my current staff that really is a 9 to 6 world, they would be like, "What are you doing?" But lawyers, that was fine, and even support staff. And it wasn't like I was saying, I'm not interfering with your day. I want your kids to be asleep, but I need to be able to talk to you if you want to potentially work with us. Then moved to a woman who would do the screening for me. I found a part-time person on Craigslist. She would do the screening. And back in the day when we were all still in the office full time, she would have people come to one Starbucks and interview with her. If she liked them, she'd send them down the street to the Starbucks closer to our office where I would meet them. And if I liked them, I'd bring them up to the office. That was sort of the 1, 2, 3. Today, and I'm a big believer in this, we have a robust recruiting mechanism at both Price, Benowitz, and at BluShark with a senior recruiter. Because even though we use outside recruiters, every dollar that I spend internally cuts down on the external piece. And then secondarily, putting a team, primarily international, under that person who can help both with international recruitment and screening of domestic people, and basically allowing that. So to me, just like intake for a law firm, every dollar you spend, you make more money. I genuinely believe that the more effort you put into creating the biggest possible funnel for your talent acquisition, the better off you'll be, because whether it's expansion or replacing attrition, you really need to make sure that you're in a place where you can get that talent in, because that's the fuel that helps build your clients and build your business.
But most people, firms or any companies really don't grow beyond a certain point, right? And you mentioned, obviously, you start with 2 people and you grew to over 36 lawyers and support staff and everyone else. What were some of the key things that allowed you to grow? And then obviously you brought those on the digital side to your clients too.
I think it was, if starting off with the law firm, I still remember, and this is something we talk about, as you mentioned, 2 podcasts, one on law firm growth, the law firm blueprint with Jay Ruane, who's also scaled a criminal firm. We do everything from PI to criminal to trust estates and family, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and now South Carolina. What I have done is looked at each place. Can I make money if I expand here? And then hire somebody. And the question always is, when do you hire? No different than what you have within your business, right? You have X amount of revenue, X amount of clients. And I think that thinking about what comes next and what you would need, because if you don't hire that next person, there's going to be a moment where your clients don't get what they need. And I've had that once or twice where we didn't staff up enough for what we needed. And that's really a tough place to be, because then you're sort of frustrated. And then, God forbid, you have any sort of attrition. So you're in growth mode, you're going to need somebody. And ironically, I find solace from the mantra of my law partner, Dave, who's not a business guy first. He's really a lawyer first, but he is somebody who is very good at saying, hey, if you look at a salary for the year, I remember early on, it might be a $60,000 or $70,000 salary. Today, it would be the equivalent of 100, 120, just to keep it as real as possible. If you look at that number with benefits and everything else, it's pretty scary. But if you say, hey, that's going to be $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000 for a quarter, and even 6 months is $40,000 to $60,000, that is a lot easier to internalize and be like, hey, I got enough runway for that. God forbid we don't make any money with that. We'll still be fine. And the truth is, and this is what we talk about in law firm blueprint so much, but it's applicable to all the areas. If you have that person in place with a running start, because it's rare, assuming you're in growth mode, that you're not going to be able to find the work for them. It has been rare. And again, it is easy to bring overhead up. And that's the next piece. So if you're looking at stuff as a business owner, let's take the agency side, and you start looking at things like EBITDA, it is easy to see that contract slightly. But I feel like and then you have to like say, okay, I better see growth or I'm in trouble. But I think that we see the same thing in all these areas with lawyers determining how much money to put into advertising. If you advertise for where you wish to be, that's an argument. It's risk, and you want to do it smartly. But let's say, God forbid, it doesn't work as well as you want. It's not like you're going to make no money. You'll just make slightly less. And so the idea is, and there are people who go all in much more aggressive than I am, but I see this with clients around the country where and I've seen the mentality change in digital marketing from, let me spend $3,000 or $4,000 per month and hope that something happens, to, okay, a case in the personal injury space, now the over under in some markets is 4K. If you're spending $16,000 a month, you've got to get 4 more cases. That's not crazy talk. Whereas if you do paid search, you might not even get that. Now, you may not get an organic, but the idea is once you build out an organic presence, then you have these stepping stones to go to. So I think a lot of it has to do is, if you know where you want to be, and whether it's employees or whether it's marketing, whatever it is, making sure you have that fuel for the fire so that you can get to that. Because if you don't, no matter what marketing you do, you're not going to be able to squeeze that much more out if you don't have the labor to produce it.
Seth, I'm wondering, what separates you from some of the law firms you work with? You decided to build it internally, right? And the law firms you work with just they don't want to handle that piece. So who's like an ideal client? What separates your firm to the ones that you serve?
Well, it's not that it separates it. I think we're just a solid firm like everybody else with the same issues, same hiring issues, same all these issues. We've scaled slightly more. Some people are wiser. I went to multiple verticals. I'm not sure that's always wisest. The people stay in one, sometimes riches and niches. As our buddy Chris Dreyer, one of your buddies, talks about, like, I get it, right? There are advantages to staying there. I tried to be able to have my cake and eat it too with multiple niches. It's not like I have my criminal guy doing PI and my PI guy doing family. I've created these silos with experts doing work. But I think that what it comes down to, Jeremy, is that we do what we love, right? And if I love the digital side, so I built it and I grew it, and I didn't see anything in the market that did what I wanted at value. There were people who weren't doing it well. I'm sure there were some out there. I never found them. And so today I like to think of myself that we're giving people the best possible value for their digital investment. That said, my law partner, I suggested he do a podcast. Like, I have these two, one on SEO, one on law firm growth. He was doing white collar crime. He's going to be able to network with people. It's genius, right? Why would you not do this, right? You love it. Look at
white collar crime. That'd be a great one. Yeah, totally.
Right? White collar crime, federal criminal defense.
I'll talk to him. I'll be like, you should definitely do one.
No, he should do it. And he did it. He did 3 episodes and it stopped. I'm saying
that it wasn't for him.
It wasn't for him. And look, he also didn't pay Jeremy money. If he paid Jeremy money, he'd be there like a personal trainer at the gym. Jeremy's like, where's the stuff you're paying me? Why is it not there? He did 3 and he gave up. Another thing, family and work got in the way, and he didn't do it. Did it really get in the way? No. If he loved it, if he had the Jeremy smile on podcasting, he'd be doing it. We all do what we love. If I said to you, I need you to optimize websites, you'd be like, yeah, I'll do it. It'll never happen, right? Writing a blog.
It'll never happen.
If I said to you, hey, I think we should do a podcast on, what are the greatest qualities of leaders, and we're going to get the best and brightest around, and you're going to put that together. Like, look what you've done, right? Like, we all do what we like, and I see it in marriage. My wife, if she wants to do something, she's going to do it. If she doesn't, it's not going to happen, or it's going to be really painful to make happen. And so I see this, and to me, if you figure out what you're great at, what you're going to do great, and then ideally buy the things around you that you're not going to do. And like, there are things that you do that are a passion play, where, it could be done better hiring somebody. Absolutely. But if you really despise something, it likely isn't going to happen. And so to me, not why bother, you still, there are things we do that we don't love in order to get to a means to an ends. But like, when I look at the people you've interviewed and what you've done and how you've brought things out of people, that's not going to happen if you thought, oh, wow, this is my road to riches and I'm going to do this. Like, you're not sitting here in some like fancy studio with flying people in. You're like, I get out of bed every day. This excites me. I'm going to get to talk to people. It gets me jazzed, and I'm going to add content to this world, and people are going to connect with me, and I'll make a buck along the way. And to me, I look at it very similarly. So, if every once in a while we've had a handful of clients who have decided to do something in house. When I speak, some people in the audience go out and say, I love it. This is for me. And I'm like, God bless. My attitude is not to sell, but to teach and share. And if some people want to do it themselves, great. Half the time, those people come back to us years later saying, I get it. Now I see why it's so difficult. And I end up doing more with them. So I'm a really big believer in do what you love, because it's going to be a lot easier. But that said, there are times when we have to do things that we don't love. Maybe you don't love the editing of this as much, but if you don't, you're not going to have any products. So you have to figure those pieces out.
Yeah, no, I love that distinction of really there's some people that will be a fit, some people won't, because you've built this engine and machine for that's because you love that stuff. You love the business side, you love the digital side. What does an ideal client look like for you?
Well, I mean, look, we have B2C clients, right? That's our world, business to consumer. So we have business to consumer clients, and those clients are ones that, and I've learned enough over the years. So there's a hierarchy of digital. So for example, on digital marketing, criminal is probably the highest and best use of digital marketing, in the sense that nobody wants to talk to anybody if they get a DUI. Some people. But most people are like, hey, what can I do myself? Keep it secret. PI, you have TV, billboards, friends got to check, and people use search, right? So it's a great place, and the prizes are great. Things like family, half the people might talk to their girlfriend about who they used. Some people may not. So it's 50-50. And then as you go down, like a trusted estates, I'd say 90% of the market on the more advanced side goes through estate planning. It goes through resources like a financial advisor or divorce lawyer or something like that, and that those are on the higher end side. It's a very small percentage that come through digital, but there's less people competing. So figuring out, so the ideal client is somebody who wants to grow. If somebody doesn't want to grow, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Similar to what you're doing, right? If somebody wants to build their herd, you're an awesome engine for that. And so for me, I have certain rules. If the over under for minimum is a $400,000 gross revenue. If you have a solo who's doing less than 400,000, my attitude is we'll build a website. We have a program for them. We call it Silver Shark, but we won't spend real money on SEO. We have a low dollar program to get them stable, allow them to do whatever they're going to do to beg, borrow, and steal, and get themselves so they have a corpus of income to be able to afford it. I don't want to drain them unless you're independently wealthy. If you're making $400,000 a year or less, you're making $250,000 and you spend $5,000 a month on digital, it's going to drain you. It's going to put strain on you. I don't like that. So I really like till somebody has enough to be comfortable with it, especially for organic, right? Paid, you see stuff relatively quickly, usually a lower ROI. Organic can have amazing ROI, but it takes a while to build up that authority, to build up that traffic. It doesn't happen overnight. And if you don't have a war chest to get there, or at least the ability to lay that out, I don't want to be in that position. So I'm always balancing. The final piece of the question for an ideal client is, if somebody is like, let's say they're a solo and they're doing $400,000, and I know that I could make them, let's say they could invest another 50, and with the certainty get at least a 3-to-1 ROI. I'd like them to have 7 or 8, but let's take a 3-to-1 for like paid search. The problem is that to do that, they would either have to kill themselves, but when they add another $50,000 worth of staff effort to do that work, plus they paid 50, all of a sudden you're killing yourself for $50,000 pre-tax. To me, like that's not the thing. If you say to me, hey, I want to get 1, 2, and then 3 associates, game on. I know how to do this. But if somebody tells me, I look at it, if I can't make you, and I say this to employees who come to work for me, if I can't make you better off with me than without me, I don't want to work with you. I really try and genuinely believe that if I understand their business model and I see a path, that's great. But if I don't, if I know that their business model is nonsense, the few times I've attempted to sort of close my eyes and say, fine, we'll work with that nonsense, it almost always falls apart.
Yeah. I know we have a few more minutes, so many questions. We won't get to it, but I want to point people to your website. People can check out BluSharkDigital.com, BLU, sharkdigital.com. They have a blog. There's 2 podcasts there because I really want to go into. There's so much that goes into.
Jeremy, taking us out of the transactional piece. I just love talking about this stuff. I'm on social, just friended you on all different social platforms. My feeling is make it a conversation. You have questions, just talk. This is not like you have to buy anything.
Well, I mean, I know you
just like you on a podcast. My guess is you'll talk all day on podcasts.
Yeah, well, I know you have another appointment coming up in a couple minutes, but one thing that sticks out that there's a lot of mistakes that lawyers make because you could drive as many cases to them as possible, calls, but if there are certain things not done, those calls don't convert. Answering there's so many things that happen after that people make mistakes, and so your job is to get them calls, right?
Yeah.
So how do you help them, even though maybe it's not exactly in the job description, to convert those calls?
No,
everything is, right?
No, it is. Look, our next podcast, when we do part 2, Seth and Jeremy, we'll get into this, but intake is everything. And we look at it, when we have access to CallRail, which records the calls, we work with people because look, we can drive all the clients we want to them, but if they don't answer the calls, what good is it? You could have this amazing funnel to bring people to get them help, but if you're not able to return the calls of the people that are interested in podcasting, and those people end up either going somewhere else or not doing it at all, then it doesn't do you any good. We're not there for our health. And so, yes, we need to make sure there's a closed loop. The next piece that's even more advanced, 100% intake, everything. Second is if the sausage making, if somebody has terrible reviews, if somebody came to some guy has a 3.9 as a lawyer, you can't do that. You need to have scores in the mid to ideally high 4s. You can't sit there and produce crap substance. And particularly if you don't answer the phone, it's not going anywhere. So how the phones are answered, and it evolves. It's not a straight line. You start getting busier. You got to change what you're doing. Somebody falls off their meds in your intake department. You have to identify it, make changes. Your manager, promote somebody to manager, but they can't manage. You got to see that quickly. These are all things that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis.
I want to point that out because there's a simplicity, but really that's just step 1 of 72 of getting the person to call, and then the real work begins. But my last question, Seth, is mentors. Who are some of your business mentors, whether personal or distant, that you recommend other people check out?
Look, there are so many amazing people depending on your space and where you are. I mentioned earlier to see, early on, Michael Gerber just on scaling a business. Then I saw him try to work within the legal space. Didn't love that as much. Vern Harnish and what he has done as the grandfather of what has become the whole of EOS scaling up and traction. But he has scaling up, but he essentially birthed all these different amazing organizations that have come out from him. And so to me, within my industry, there are lawyers that have built the national trial lawyers like Keith Givens and people who are upstream from you, half a generation or generation ahead of you, sitting down, looking at what they did, knowing that it won't be the same path for you. But to me, those people and reaching out like you did to me and I do to others, just having these conversations, incredibly valuable in building that network around you. And I see that you've clearly been in the EO world at some level or another. And that, to me, these people, that Devin Shane, random person outside of legal, he's bought and sold more companies than most people. Just his mind on sales and interviewing people like Jack Daly. It's not like I can emulate everything they're doing, but taking little pieces here and there and building that whole empire.
Seth, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out BluSharkDigital.com to learn more, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was great.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.